So, all right, number 5 in the top 5 Big 12 spring questions. We'll go through some of these kind of randomly. This is the one I popped up with today. Number 5, how quickly can Baylor install their new offense, get used to it in the spring, and then build on it, in the coming months and using that knowledge because it's going to be completely different. And it's probably better for the personnel they have. That doesn't mean that they're going to learn it or pick it up quickly, but they have new quarterbacks, new wide receivers. They'll have new linemen, new kind of everything across the board. So how quickly and how smoothly does this go in the install? Because the smoother it goes, the better it'll be once the fall comes around.
Well, they need an offensive line coach, so there's that now. But beyond that, this is big. But the thing with them is it's not just a one side or the other. Their defense was their worst part of their entire team last year. So at worst with the with the offense, you need it to be good, but you also needed to just be better than it has been, but also really good in the case that your defense isn't that much better because you're going to have to score points. So, their offense is a pivotal part of this team because it's either going to be great balancing with the improvements on defense or it's going to have to kind of carry the load if the defense doesn't get much better. So, I think it's not an overly complicated system that Jake Spavital runs. I think it's been pointed out multiple times how there's a lot of guys on this roster who probably run something similar at some point or another. So I think that the carryover or the learning part of it should be okay. But that is something that they've got to be better and more explosive on offense. They just have had no explosion really the last couple of years. And they've had spurts, but nothing consistent. And
it was more like if you saw a big play, it was like, damn.
Yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, that's the first time we've seen that in 3 weeks.
Mine was like, oh, who fell down?
Right, yeah.
And then most of the time, if you watch like a big play, you're like, oh, look, 58 fell down. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that good for them for noticing.
Basically, yeah.
Yep. Number 4, how healthy is Cam Rising? Can he help them out in spring, or is this going to be a push to the fall thing? Because his knee, by his own account, was obliterated. That's why we didn't see him this last year. And how healthy is he? And will he be the Cam Rising going forward that he was before? Because running was a very big part of his game, and the fearlessness he had back there was a very big part of his game. If he's not going to be the same, how does that change Utah? Now, look, there will be upgraded at quarterback even if he has to adapt his game just because of his skills as a passer. But how healthy is Cam Rising? A big question for me as Utah now moves into the Big 12.
Well, I think he'll be as healthy as he could possibly be. He's had so much time off. Yeah. If he's not as healthy as possible, then, something went wrong along the way. But no, he's going to be 100%, at this stage. And so long as there's no knock-on-wood setbacks during the spring or anything like that, and he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I already saw an interview with Whittingham where he's talking about their increased recruiting footprint in Texas as a result of now being in the Big 12 and how they've already started to change some of their recruiting approach. And they've gotten into Texas in years past, but I think that's just going to be more of a focus for them now. But, he's got to be as healthy as he can possibly be at this stage. He hasn't played in a long time, and certainly by the time the season rolls around.
Number 3. Just following that same line of thought, how healthy is Jaylen Daniels? Is this something that he can shake and move past, or is this going to be a lingering issue for him? He's one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the Big 12. And while I felt confident about saying that Shadur Sanders is the best and most talented quarterback coming into the league, I still think if it came down to it and you said, you've got 3 minutes to go win the game, who do you want? I'd be like, I still want Jaylen Daniels just because of what he can do and what he's proven over the years. But how healthy is he? There's no Jason Bean behind him right now that played really well down the stretch for the Jayhawks. Until he, too, also got hurt. But if Jaylen Daniels can be healthy and play in the majority of their games this year, this makes Kansas a legit Big 12 title contender. And how healthy is he in the spring to help build on that and improve on that? Or do they have to hold him out of spring, too, because he's still dealing with lingering issues?
Yeah, I should add with Cam Rising that in the same article I was reading earlier, that Whittingham said he's a full participant in spring. Mm-hmm. So that answers your question about his health. But, with Jaylen Daniels, that's a little bit more of a mystery. I haven't seen the latest update on him, I guess from Lance Leipold whenever he's discussed it here recently. But that is a much bigger concern than it was last year when you had Jason Bean. I mean, Jason Bean was as solid and reliable as a backup quarterback as there probably was in the entire country. Certainly one of the most experienced quarterbacks, backup-wise, in the entire country. And he held it down for you.
For them, yeah.
He held it down for you, a Texas guy, Jason Bean. But I think that's right. He did a really good job.
Yeah, he went to Lake Ridge in Mansfield.
Yeah. But Jaylen Daniels, as we know, is a really fun playmaker, and we just haven't been able to see that in a really long time. But I think everybody who's projecting KU next year is pinning that on Jaylen Daniels being back to form from 2 years ago. And is he? I mean, we don't know. We haven't seen him in so long. But hopefully for the league, as far as an entertainment value goes, hopefully for Kansas as far as competitiveness goes, that he is back to being the Jaylen Daniels of old, because that was a major frustration for them last year, was just his unavailability. And to have Jason Bean no longer there, that matters even more than it did last year.
Jeff Grimes, their offensive coordinator.
No. Number 2, who still has the most holes to fill? Is it BYU? Is it Baylor? Is it Cincinnati? I mean, I'm leaning towards Cincinnati. I think Houston still has a lot to fill. But, when you're looking at the rosters of all these teams and the experience they have coming back, what they've done in the portal, I'm very curious to see the full spring rosters and where they have people slotted in the depth charts, just because even with the portal and you can kind of guess all this stuff, sometimes it's not as clear cut as you think. Hey, we're going to get this transfer. Oh, well, he must be the new starting linebacker. Well, no, he's a redshirt freshman. We're going to kind of keep him on the same track he was. He's just a better fit here, and look, or, in a case of a guy at Baylor like Josh White, who just hasn't, he was a big-time transfer there out of LSU and just hasn't really done anything but special team stuff in the years that he's been here. Is it one of those things? So we'll see. I'd like to see all that, but it'll be very telling who has the kind of the gaping holes or the things where you look and go, yeah, they probably still need to get a guy at this position.
From our over-unders, and we could probably do those in a better way, a more clean way, because it's hard rattling through so many dadgum teams, man. You got 16 teams. It's a lot to try and almost should break it up into 4 segments rather than 2, you know? To just be able to focus a bit more on the 4. But a couple of things that stood out to me when I left on Friday was, one with Kansas, I was very confident on them going over, but I don't think I'm impacting Andy Kotelnicki and him not being a part of the show anymore. There at OC, even though I do think Jeff Grimes will do a good job there. And with BYU, I said over, but that was one that kind of stuck with me, and I was kind of gnawing on that some more on Friday night. I don't know, man. I think they've got a lot to figure out still themselves. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Baylor, Cincinnati, BYU, and throw in whoever else you want to. There's a lot of teams and ground to cover. I mean, what kind of holes does Arizona State still have? I mean, there's a lot of question marks still all across the league. Yeah, Arizona State's a roster I'm curious to see, because he brought in a lot of young transfers last year that weren't really going to play all that much anyway, but he had to fill out the roster. And Kenny Dillingham's a pretty shrewd recruiter and talent developer. At least he was as a coordinator. So those guys in year 2 would be kind of interesting. But
one of the things Craig just brought up, on Mondays during the college football season, because there's 16 teams, we need 4 hours. 4 per hour. We cannot scramble our heads, try to just break down 16 teams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. What's the Big Ten is going to have 18, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so
good Lord,
do that you're going to have to divide that up. I mean, you're going to have to do that.
The Big Ten network's got 3 new shows because of it. Yeah.
Half the league is nearly as big as the Big 12 was for years.
Yeah. No, I get it.
9 teams. The Big 12 was 10 teams for forever, and so yeah, that's the crazy part of realignment, is these much bigger conferences. But yeah, I don't know that I weighed in enough of the OC impact there for Kansas. We'll see, obviously. I do think Jeff Grimes will do a great job, but I'm curious the next time we talk BYU of just – I know Sataki's not on a hot seat, but if they're not much better next year, does that put him on one? I don't know what his leash is like, because
I mean, former player, all of that. You know what?
They're in a conference now.
Now,
so
you've
got to start showing that you can win this regularly when you don't get to pick your schedule like they did as much, or you don't get to, And
I'll be honest with you, Gary Bohannon doesn't set my world on fire.
No,
I mean he has hardly played
9 quarterbacks in the depth.
I know, but he's hardly played the last couple of years. So, anyways, those are definitely 2 candidates to wonder about. But you could throw a bunch more teams in there as far as holes to fill.
And I'm kind of the opinion that Gary Bohannon's playing the wrong position now. But
some thought that when he was coming out of high school.
If he's healthy and can play, he can help your team on and off the field just because
absolutely.
of his presence. Yeah.
Number 1, what big spring transfers will happen? And this one,
Are those like
those are the
viruses?
portals. Those are the portals.
We have talked about this 5 times.
No.
Those hypno-toad eyes. Yes.
Is that Emory?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Emery Googled a picture of Grimace's backside. And
Okay.
that's what that is.
Those are the ones that like catch my attention. So you're doing it right.
Well, next time you go to McDonald's, don't get a peek at Grimace's butt, but people will put you on a list. Number 1, what big spring transfers will happen? I think this year, and look, the transfer is, I do think that you'll see maybe more spring transfers we have in years past because of the way the coaching carousel fell so late, and particularly Alabama being involved in that if Alabama comes out of spring and Kalen DeBoer says, here's the 10 things we need, and it's probably pretty public about it, then there might be guys that are like, oh, what now?
Yeah.
Alahuha? Yeah, going.
You mean in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah. So I think that Alabama and the Saban thing kind of, because they lost a lot of guys that they normally would never have lost, but the filling that Alabama cavity there, and then whatever happens with some of the other schools as well, you're going through a spring practice with your coach. Like, look, UCLA and Deshaun Foster, like that happened last week. So all those things I think will affect it more this year because of the late part of the coaching carousel. I mean, theoretically, Michigan, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the case. They've already lost, 19 guys to the draft or whatever anyway. So it's not like they have a whole bunch of guys who would jump ship, and people feel pretty good about Sharon Moore. But those kind of things, because of the late hiring cycle this year, I think will affect the spring, and there could be some big names in that who ride through those first, 15 to 20 practices, whatever it is, and go, yeah, this new thing isn't for me.
Yeah, there will be post-spring transfers for sure. Some of them invited to go enter the portal and pushed into the portal, and then some that just decide, hey, this school came calling via my 7-on-7 coach or whatever, and there's going to be those instances as well. So, yeah, there will be some. Hard to peg who they might be. You're going to have some quarterback competitions play out because obviously some guys who don't end up with the starting jobs will probably start to look elsewhere or have people come in and knock on their doors. But, yeah, that's a question we have in front of us here these next few months for sure.
All right, Paul, thank you very much. Emory Winters dialing up 365 Sports with his